Будьмо. That means let us be in Ukrainian. We use it instead of cheers, and it means let us be healthy, let us be together, let us be celebrating this moment.
That's why I always say I don't believe in walls, I believe in longer tables.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for tuning into Chicago Humanities Tapes, the audio arm of the live Chicago Humanities Spring and Fall Festivals. I know you're like, you sure are saying the word humanities a lot, and I think I know what that means, but tell me again, just to be sure. And it means we bring you the best in arts, culture, science, technology, literature, politics. It's like school, but you like all the classes, and Jason P. isn't there to make fun of your hair. Head to chicagohumanities.org to check out information on previous programs and to sign up for our email list to be the first to know about our next batch of expert speakers and see them live in Chicago. I'm Elisa Rosenthal, and I'm continuing my mission to find the answers to humanity's biggest questions by digging through our 30-plus year archive and our recent sold-out events. Today's episode draws from two such recent events, direct from fall 2023. First up, Chef José Andrés, interviewed by Mark Bittman, followed by Anna Voloshyna, interviewed by Rick Bayless. Talk about a dream dinner party guest list. Needless to say, you have an incredible episode ahead of you. When times are hard, how can food unite us? Between the humanitarian efforts of the chefs in the following programs and the excitement for life and food they bring, today's program is a palate-cleansing appetizer, an invigorating main course, and a faith in humanity restoring dessert. Part 1, Chef José Andrés and renowned food journalist Mark Bittman. José Andrés was born in Spain and immigrated to the U.S. in 1991. He co-founded a group of acclaimed restaurants and established World Central Kitchen in 2010, an organization that goes into communities that have experienced a disaster and not only cooks and provides food for them, but also sets them up to feed their community once World Central Kitchen leaves. Check out his book, The World Central Kitchen Cookbook, Feeding Humanity, Feeding Hope, for inspiring stories and recipes. I've linked to it and all the other books that will be mentioned in the show notes. His acclaimed restaurants are throughout the country and the world, and be sure to check out Jaleo and Bizarre Meat by José Andrés right here in Chicago. Mark Bittman is known for the How to Cook Everything series, as well as his work in global food culture and policy, and for being the long-running food writer for the New York Times. Make sure to pick up a copy of The Best American Food Writing 2023, which he curated this year.
We are not cooking tonight, so I hope you will not be disappointed now. Hi, Mark. Talking in English?
We have a chronological question and answer here. And when we met, you were 30, you were energetic, you were already pretty iconoclastic. You were clearly destined to do things that were more interesting than open a couple of great restaurants, which is what you started by doing. You were inspired and affiliated with the mad genius Ferran Adrià at the beginning, and I say that affectionately, of course. But I don't think a lot of us know about your early life and what drew you to food, and especially to creative food. So can you tell us something about that?
Yes, Mark. I mean, number one, because this is like very raw. Like we're right here, he asked me a question, and like you don't know how fascinating it is for me to be here with all of you in Chicago, in a city I came first time almost 30 years ago, and I didn't know anyone. To be interviewed by a man who I knew who this man was, because who he was in the food world. And now being here with restaurants in Chicago, with many people in the audience now I call friends, being next to this man, for me is giving me the chills. So thank you to you, Mark. Thank you for all of you. And my life probably not any different than every one of your lives. At the end, all our lives in magical ways are the same. And I realized that I became who I became. Probably you will agree with me on who you are becoming, who you are, thanks to the people that always was around us every moment of our lives. Even people we forgot, but that nonetheless were important in who we became. I have plenty of those people in my life that they invested their time, their effort, their love in making me who I am. And this goes for every one of you. And I hope, you can clap. We don't charge for clapping at the Humanities Festival. She's my type of person. And for me, I never had the best relationship with my mom or my dad. Not to their fault or to my fault, I believe, life. You know when sometimes you realize that nothing comes with instructions? You tell me when I became a father, and I'm looking like they're my wife giving the baby, I'm like, what are the instructions? Here, the baby crying in my arms. I'm like, holy sick. How do I handle this thing? But it's the same to becoming a husband or a wife, in my case, a husband, but the same becoming a boyfriend or the same becoming just a boy or becoming a chef. But in a way, with what I told you with the relationship with my family, at the end, I am everything I am because I had a fascinating woman as a mother and a fascinating man as a father. That they were not perfect, but I realized I'm not perfect either. But they had amazing things that made everybody around them always feel welcome. And my mom was a very early influence in my life in cooking, Mark. In a way that now I'm realizing what that influence was. Which my mom was a nurse. My mom became a nurse pregnant of my fourth brother because she had to bring a new salary home to be able to pay the bills. Pregnant of my fourth brother and being a mom, working mom at home, she carried the family forward, became a nurse, studying hard. My mom was really, and on top of that, Monday through Friday, she will be the one in charge of feeding people, my brothers and I. My father was more the weekend. Everybody helped though. And my mom, at the end of the month, when was never anything left in the fridge, it looked like if you went to Best Buy to buy a fridge and you open, oh, so beautiful, empty. That was the commercial of my mom. But she will always find a half egg that was boiled dry, that the poor egg was almost with a signal there saying, please save me. The little piece of dried chicken from the roasted chicken from 2 weeks before that still was there saying, what is going on? Please eat me away. And she will get the chicken and the egg and she'll chop it. And she'll make a bechamel with flour and milk. And she'll add all these chopped, whatever leftovers were in the kitchen, and she'll make croquetas that she'll roll in the breadcrumbs of the old bread of the last month using the coffee grinder. And I can believe right now today, those croquetas that came from my brothers and I, a message of love, home. Anytime I went back, what do you want? Croquetas. I cannot believe I'm charging people now for croquetas now. So this, in a way, was very important for me. On top of my father, the weekend cook, inviting everybody, never keeping a list of who he invited and said yes, meaning 10 people could come or 40, because my father was very generous in feeding the many. And my mom will be always, come on, what happens if everybody comes? My father always said, big problems have simple solutions. If more people come, we add more rice to the paella pan. So you see, between my mom maximizing the power of feeding a family almost with nothing, and the power of my father used to take any problem in a very relaxed way, but nonetheless always being, in a strange way, successful. This early on was more important in my life than I realized, even until recently. And that was, in a way, my early culinary days.
Yeah. Nice story.
I have other stories, but I'm going to leave them at that.
Before we start talking about World Central Kitchen, which is probably what most people here want to hear about, I thought I might give you an opportunity to talk about another important thing from a few years ago called DC Central Kitchen, which tracks very nicely with how you've started and where we're going. So,
well, again, he's asking me the question, but he knows the answer. No, under my perspective, but under his perspective, because he's been part of that organization, or other organizations in New York and across America. But DC Central Kitchen became a very important part also of my life. For the ones of you who don't know, I was in the Spanish Navy. And I was cooking for the Admiral, and I was like, really? I am in the Spanish Navy, and I have to cook for the Admiral in his house? Phew, I want to go on a boat. I knock on the door, even everybody told me I couldn't tell the Admiral anything, and I didn't tell him anything. I only told him, wouldn't it be nice that you that enjoy my cooking so much, that other sailors will be able to enjoy the same cooking you are enjoying? This was a way for me to tell him, I'm very happy to cook for you, but I want to go on a boat. I went on a boat, and I traveled the world. And first time I visit Africa, and first time I visit Latin America and the Caribbean. But for me, it was first time I visit the United States. I came to a city called Pensacola. A city that was celebrating the 5 flags. You need to understand, the ship I was on was not any ship, was the ship. 4-mast, beautiful white boat, sailing, tall ship boat. It was like a movie. Arriving to Pensacola with the Blue Angels, the Navy planes, pilots just flying above the boat, with the white beaches of Pensacola, and then realizing that the 5 flags, one of them with permission of the Native Americans that didn't have any one of those flags, but one of the flags was the Spanish Castilian flag. And like, holy shit, sure I belong here. I'm sorry. Well, I'm Catholic. Sundays we ask for forgiveness, and boom. So I'm only a few hours a sinner. That's all. But I'm telling you that story because for me it was important, because it was the moment of belonging. Yes, we arrived with permission of the Native Americans and the Vikings. We arrived like almost 100 years before all the British. Sorry, but it's true. Yeah. And where we arrive, the food is always much better than anywhere the British arrive. I mean, this is off the record, but it's true. Everybody knows it. But this was an important moment in my life, because it was the moment I understood. I arrived in New York, Lady Liberty, Ellis Island. And that's the moment that watching that Lady Liberty with what it's all about, and watching Ellis Island, understanding the meaning of Ellis Island for immigrants like me, that I didn't thought about coming back to America, but everything began in a way creating the DNA inside me of I want to be part of this without realizing. I finished the military service. I came back, in case there's any immigration officer in the house, I came with a visa, legal. This happens sometimes. And I came back to New York. I became a cook in New York. Before realizing I landed in 1993 in Washington, D.C., I opened my first restaurant. We are celebrating 30 years this year, Jaleo, which now we have one in. And long story short, I realized that restaurants like mine are very important to create communities, because people like you join us, and we all create a place to all of us to belong. We create community. But very quickly I understood that in restaurants like mine that we feed the few, we wouldn't really be successful if we then were part of other organizations that were in the business of feeding the many. And this is when This is Central Kitchen came into my life. I began volunteering. This is an organization that does amazing things, more than 35 years open, founded by a guy called Robert Egger, a guy that was a bartender, and the guy that saw that we were wasting food. So he was ahead of anybody talking about wasting food, but he was ahead of everything else in the sense of when we waste food, we don't really waste food. What we do is we waste people's lives. And this guy told me that I was 23, 24, that philanthropy seems is always about the redemption of the giver, when philanthropy must be about the liberation of the receiver. And in that place, the same lessons that my mom was teaching me on making croquetas with nothing, I began sharing that same knowledge to men and women that This is Central Kitchen was bringing coming out of the streets, people that were homeless, American-born, Washingtonians, but somehow they didn't belong to a city. Me being an immigrant, I already was kind of belonging in a way more than them, or at least I was experiencing a better life than all of them. This organization began taking people out of the streets, coming out of Yale, training them to be cooks, paying farmers that they were about to throw food away, but somehow making some money out of food was about to be wasted, bringing the food, bringing the people, bringing a very powerful idea, let's then feed the homeless of the city, all with $1. $1 to give hope to people, $1 to train people, $1 to rescue food is about to thrown away, $1 then to find them jobs in restaurants like mine. And there I am, not only sharing my knowledge next to hundreds of other chefs in the city, but in the process, those men and women were also teaching us lessons about the meaning of belonging. Not like they were in the street, that meant they felt they belonged less. They only were never given the same opportunity I was given. That organization changed my life because, in a way, showed me the power of food to really stop throwing money at the problem, stop giving the crumbs to the hungry, but actually investing in true solutions that, in a fascinating way, has shaped what Washington, D.C. is, still with the problems we may have, where we were all part of the community. Was not us versus them, was, again, we, the people, together trying to solve the problem, one plate of food at a time. That's what This is Central Kitchen did for me.
I realize now I don't have to actually ask questions. I could just say like one word. But seriously, let's move on to World Central Kitchen, which is, I mean, I do know this story, it's true, but not everybody here knows this story. And the beginning of World Central Kitchen is another fascinating tale.
So the beginning of the story is not really the moment we began with World Central Kitchen, but came way before. Came in moments like when I read John Steinbeck, and I understood in Grapes of Wrath that even in the richest country in the world seems was a lot of inequality. Reading The Pearl, I mean, I love Steinbeck. He's quick, short, I understood his English. And I felt like, yeah. Moments like when I was in the military service in that tall ship, going to Rio de Janeiro or to Abidjan in Ivory Coast, and seeing that, well, maybe there was also poverty in Barcelona, the city I grew up. I never saw what I saw in Ivory Coast, in Abidjan, or in the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, or outside the Dominican Republic. And that began also as a young boy, kind of, wow. Even in the places I think there may not be hunger, here we have people that are going through. Obviously, all of that had a lot to do with my involvement with This is Central Kitchen. But then slowly but surely, certain things began happening. Obviously, the lessons learned in this central kitchen, I became the chairman of the organization, of the board. I'm still very involved with that organization to this day. But I began seeing that things were happening and food and water was an afterthought. And I always thought that if it's a universal human right, that should be food and water should be available to all. Maybe because I was a young Catholic boy that in religion class, obviously, becoming a cook, for me, Jesus was like the coolest, right? This guy, you give him some fish and some bread, and the guy feeds everybody. I mean, we are over in the restaurant business if we have many guys like him. Yeah, but it's true. But in a way, I remember watching Katrina, New Orleans, poor communities in the low 9, forgotten. Tens of thousands of Americans, in a way, in a very big catastrophe, forgotten. But even if we didn't take care of everybody, was those moments that are very big in my mind, when thousands of Americans went into the Superdome, an arena that, if you think about it, it took days, if not over a week, to bring food and water to the people in that arena. Terrible things were happening inside that arena. You know what an arena and a stadium is? If I ask you, everybody will say, yeah, it's where I go to see my NFL team or my NBA team or my favorite musician, but everybody is wrong. An arena, a stadium, is a gigantic restaurant that entertains with sports and music. When I go to the baseball stadium, everybody's eating hot dogs. I don't see anybody watching the game. Nobody seems to be able to hit the ball, God's sake. And that moment for me, I watched in the comfort of my home, in action. And it's the moment that I began really thinking, oh my God, can we do more? Then we saw September 11 in New York. Random, fascinating moments of citizens that were trying to help by just putting a grill outside the restaurant or just by opening the doors and just making some meals to anybody that will need a meal. Not an organized effort, but random, powerful efforts of empathy. So when I began putting all this in my brain, I'm like, wow, I think my profession that we feed the few, we can feed the many if we all come together. For me, it was very important, 1996, 97. One, across the street of my restaurant, Jaleo, a red brick building was kind of reopened because they were doing construction, and they found the belongings of a person. Seems the belongings of a person that had somehow her office and her bedroom. And that's the woman that worked during the Civil War in the flying hospitals. The hospitals behind the front lines taking care of the wounded. And this is the woman that created the Missing Soldiers Office when the Civil War ended, trying to bring home clothing to the families that lost loved ones in that Civil War. And the woman that created the Red Cross in America. The woman was Clara Barton, a nurse, nonetheless, like my mom. A woman that put at the service of others that she could be healing the few, but she decided to create organizations that she could be healing the many. In emergencies or in any situation, if you have to stop a fire, you send firefighters, I began thinking. If you have destruction in an earthquake, you send search and rescue teams. If you need to heal the wounded, you send nurses and doctors. But if you have to feed people in an emergency, who do you think would be the best prepared people? With that simple idea, I was in Cayman Islands, with those moments of inaction, but only dreaming of what we could do, still watching the people that were feeding around the world in difficult circumstances through UN and World Food Program and others. Haiti happened in 2010. Destructions, hundreds of thousands of people died, hundreds of thousands of people lost their home. And I was watching in Cayman Island in the TV with my friend Eric Rippert, and but then Anthony Bourdain. And that moment I said, you know, I'm not going to watch more in the comfort. I'm going to go not to help, but to learn. As soon as I could, a few days later, a few weeks later, I got on a plane, I landed. I arrived to Haiti. I began cooking in a couple of camps. And that's the moment my learningship began in how cooks like us, we could be very important in emergency relief. That's how World Central Kitchen began, on that early 2010 earthquake. And from there, we began dreaming what else we could do as the organization slowly began learning and began adding more team members and more volunteers. That was the beginning of World Central Kitchen. I was going to go to more stories, but I'm waiting for you to ask me the question of the next story.
We're going to the same place. So I would ask specifically about Puerto Rico and Ukraine, but there may be other things you want to talk about. But people do want to hear about the work, I'm sure.
Yeah, we can. Obviously, now the missions are many that World Central Kitchen has been involved in the last 14 years, very much since we created it. We began mainly in Haiti. We began in the limbo, in the edge of disaster and development, disaster and use long-term humanitarian relief. But very slowly, we began responding in the same Haiti to some hurricanes, to some earthquakes, even at that very light scale to compare to what we do now. We went, yes, from doing few thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands with very little. And when the organization very much was me and one more person, the person running it. And when the funding came, used for the money I was raising through my restaurants. But we began learning, and we began doing certain things that I think were very powerful. Some schools in the most remote areas in Haiti, some changing some schools from charcoal cooking to clean cooking with gas, cooking school to teach women how to cook with those cleaner cooking, to try to move them away from charcoal. Projects that became important for me because in a way I was trying to bring to the rest of the world the lessons I learned in this central kitchen. But then Houston happened. That was Irma. Houston was Irma. And I went there with a team of few chefs, friends that came with me. And we did a kitchen in the convention center. We helped in the convention center. I'm not going to get into dramatic stories that happened there. Children's Hospital, we partnered with a couple of schools, one synagogue, a couple of churches, and we began feeding out of those places, not only the people inside Houston, but people out in the surrounding areas that usually are the people that are always forgotten. And when I finished the mission there, after a couple of weeks, right there, 10 days later, Maria hits Puerto Rico. Category 5, the hurricane crosses slowly but surely across the middle of the island. And whatever we read cannot do justice to the disaster that was unfolding. So I was able to land with who then became the CEO, the third CEO of World Central Kitchen, my friend Nate. And we landed. And in a way, Houston was very important in the shape of what World Central Kitchen became. But then Maria was the moment that we said, that's what we are doing from now on, and we are never going to stop, which was simple. In the worst moments of humanity, the best of humanity shows up, like I saw in September 11 right in Manhattan, or even in Washington, D.C. when the plane hit the Pentagon. But what people want is to give an opportunity to be able to help. And where the bigger organizations are not keeping you away. Because who is better than the locals to help the locals? Not every local can, because when a hurricane hits, you are in distress. People are looking for family members, people are trying to survive, people are trying to repair their roofs. So it's important that teams come from the outside. But very quickly you see that it's always locals that are willing and able to help. And what we began realizing is that if we could empower those, we have the biggest army of goodness that we could build. So in Puerto Rico, when I arrived, I sent a text message, not knowing if my friends will be able to read it. What's up? With a simple message, I'm coming. Those very simple words, from a chef to chefs, mean something very important. If you are coming and you're a chef, where are you coming? Used to write a book? No. You're coming. You're coming to help, and you're coming to start feeding. I met a chef, which is like my brother, called José Andrés, who already was trying to fix his restaurant with a generator, even when he didn't even have any gas or diesel to run it. And in that first day, 2 days after the hurricane, we were doing 1,500 meals, more or less. We went from 1,500 meals to 150,000 meals a day. We went from 1 kitchen to 34 kitchens. We got 10 food trucks that then became 20 all across the island. We were able to empower indirectly schools to open their kitchens with whatever food they had to feed their communities. At the end, we did almost 4 million meals, even I could say we influenced many more million meals. At the end, what I saw is that cooks, we were the best prepared people to help in an emergency. Why? Because everybody always asks me, and Jose, where do you get the food? Well, in the same place I get it when everything is right. In the food warehouses, in the food companies. It's always food around. It's always a restaurant somewhere. It's always people willing to join forces to start feeding. It's always people willing to drive their 4x4s to deliver to remote areas. It's always a helicopter pilot that doesn't know what to do but wants to help. And the only thing you say is, join us. We went to Ukraine, 2 people at World Central Kitchen. Before we knew it, on the first 24 hours we were feeding already. In a week we were feeding in every border city in Poland as Ukrainians were living. Before we realized, we were in every country surrounding Ukraine as refugees were living. Before we knew, we were also in Germany and in France. But at the same time, we went inside Ukraine, and we were in Lviv. And we arrived Kyiv when still the Russian troops were trying to break the defenses of the city. Before we realized, we went from, again, 1,000 meals the first day to more than 1.5 million meals a day in Ukraine. We've done more than 240 million. And we did it using creativity, using restaurants. More than 500 restaurants joined us. We were able to support them because especially American people were always very generous with us. And thanks to that generosity, we were able to put that money in real time at the service of providing relief. Who we were feeding? We built 2 kosher kitchens of people, of Jewish people living in Ukraine and in the middle of the war. We were feeding churches. We were feeding refugee centers. We were feeding kindergartens that they were trying to use their kindergarten to host as many families as they could. Millions of Ukrainians were living the horrors of war. At the same time, we were feeding in the front lines. In this war, we lost in Ukraine 6 World Central Kitchen volunteers out of 2 missiles hitting the bunker where they were sleeping. We got few kitchens destroyed. We got few bakeries. We got many trains destroyed with food, but thanks God, there was never life involved. At the end of the day, I kept asking myself, why are we here when we are losing lives? And the question, the answer to the question by the fellow Ukrainians, we put a team of almost 5,000 Ukrainians with World Central Kitchen, where every dollar was going used to help pay the restaurants, so the restaurants could pay the teams, buying the food locally so the food could help the farmers that at that point nobody was buying fruit from. In the process of aiding, we were helping the local economy somehow maintain itself. That's the way we do it. Right now we are in Armenia, where is another war. We are right now, as soon as Hamas did the crazy attack against Israel, we began feeding in Israel. At the same time, we began feeding inside Gaza because we were already there before, and we have a great partner called Anera, who they are medical. But because they know Gaza so well, we use their know-how of Gaza to do what we know, which is food. We were better because they make us better, and in the way we make them better. Inside Gaza, we've done close to 1.4 million meals, even when you're reading that food cannot get in. We're in Jordan, we're in Egypt, we're in Lebanon. Right now we are in Acapulco, in Mexico, after this crazy hurricane category 5, with helicopters trying to reach every community that is totally distance from any aid arriving because the harms that this category 5 has done. I cannot believe that now we are able to be in 7, 8 missions at the same time when we are still a very small organization of 80, 100 people. Why we do that? Because we allow people to help us. And we are able to increase the number of people that are part of our organization all the time. And now is the gift that keeps on giving. Communities that we helped before, every time something happens in another country, usually we have 5, 10, 20 people that want to come to help this other country. Why? Because before we were there helping them. So now they are here helping them, and them help them. And at the end, what you see, humanity at best. In the worst moments of humanity, the best of humanity shows up. That's unfortunately the beauty of these moments.
I want to try to do two things. We've had this conversation before, so I know it's safe. But one is, but it's not without controversy.
Do I have? Is any lawyer that can represent me?
One is to give you an opportunity to talk about the future of World Central Kitchen, if you want to do that. But there's let's just have this little. Let me give you an opportunity to talk about this. A third of just to talk about the United States, a third of Americans would be completely broke if they had an emergency that cost them more than $400. 10% of homeless people are homeless as a result of natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, etc. The work that you're doing is amazing. Everybody here agrees about this. But doesn't it point to a gaping hole in the work that the federal government, etc., ought to be doing?
Well, you're right about that. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you if I don't tell you that all of these, and especially the last 14 years, has been, a big burden on the shoulders of many. Now, I'm going to be a little bit selfish, but because you're kind of here listening to us, to me, and this looks like a confession.
I felt that too.
Are you a rabbi? In a Methodist church? That's cool. But I feel the burden, right? And the burden sometimes is a way that can be, I'm very sure all of you have a burden. And I have a feeling as we grow older, it's part of life. We feel the burden, right? Because we feel responsible. Responsibilities are genuinely ours, or responsibilities we do take on our own. And I have a feeling we are all here to try to lift up the burden out of each other. And it's okay to recognize we feel, I don't know, call it whatever. You need to go to the psychologist, or you need to talk to God, or you need to talk to your mirror, but I feel that burden. But we need to make sure that that burden is not what brings us down, but it's a burden that actually lifts us up. To understand that we are not alone, I'm not alone, but I'm surrounded by people that believe, like I do, that we can do better if we come together. I saw it when I was in the ship as a young Navy boy dreaming of an amazing world I wanted to be part of. When we were 300 crew, that doesn't matter where the wind came from, or the waves, or the currents, because we were working together as one. Doesn't matter who we were, what religion we were, even we were all Spanish people, probably all Christian and Catholic, not necessarily churchgoers, but nonetheless. that there still was 300 people from different parts of life that we worked together with one mission to take that boat to safe port. And that's at the end what life needs to be. Call it politics, call it society, call it government, call it our cities, call it our families. What do all we do to make sure that our burden actually becomes the wind behind the sails? What do we all do to make sure that our burden can always be shared so the weight is not so heavy? And how can we make that the burden is actually what gives us the purpose to serve in our families, in our work, in our society, in our community, in our country? We can be finger pointing all day we want to the problems to everybody else. Or we can use this same finger and stop finger pointing and say, I'm here. I'm here to join and to serve, and to join forces to anybody that, like me, believe that together we, the people, will always do better. So it's true that sometimes we need to be asking our government for better at every level, especially in emergencies. But at the end, I realized that the government is not them versus us. We are the government. If things are not as we want them to be, let's stop finger pointing at what they are not, and let's us be the change we want to see.
Switch gears and talk about the cookbook.
How much time? Because they said we have a clock, but it's not. It's a clock.
It is what time it is.
But
No, someone will. Don't worry.
no worry. Because I've been trying to be precise in the answering. Because with my lack of English, I use 2 or 3 more words to express myself,
This is Jose.
and that
being
makes it
brief.
longer.
This is you being brief. But let's talk about the cookbook, because it's not a typical cookbook. It's not a chefy cookbook. It's not a cookbook without a position. It's a cookbook with a position. It's an unusual book, a beautiful one, as I might add.
Well, coming from you, I mean, I just want to make sure. Obviously, you see that my name is in the cover of the book. And that was never my intention, but the contrary. It's only that an editorial these days wants to have a name in the cover of the book because somebody has to take ownership of that book. But in a way, it's very unfair that my name is in the cover of that book. Because that book and the purpose of why I thought we should be doing this book. You need to understand, I'm the founder of All Central Kitchen, but not anymore. I used to be the chairman, and now they brought me down to be a board member. And I'm very afraid I'm about to be kicked out of being a board member. And I hope I can keep being a volunteer. But the idea of the book was simple. As you said, this is not a cookbook, but this is a celebration of the people that under the most dire situations were able to do fascinating, magical things in the middle of darkness. And every one of those recipes are not really recipes. Every one of those recipes are people that made something happen just to feed fellow citizens. Where sometimes we will not have plates or forks, but we will have an amazing group of women that will make tamales. And where we didn't even have plates, but still they will have an open fire that they could be making this masa dough and fill it up with chicken or anything else they got and make these amazing tamales, sometimes with banana leaves and sometimes with corn husk. And all of a sudden, armies of those women that had those little places that sometimes we don't go because they look too informal and a side, not even a restaurant, shop on the side of the road. And we'll go to fancy restaurants. At the end of the day, those are the women that are feeding the cities and the countries in very remote, poor areas around the world. And we will go, yeah, you can, because who feeds the world? It's not cooks like us, it's really women like my mom and many others. Thanks God that women are in charge of feeding the world. If not, the world will be even more hungry. More needs to be done, so we empower them. But in this book, it's the stories of those women that we will be able to deliver tens of thousands of tamales, even when we didn't even have any organization going, but people were hungry. And we are not an organization that likes to plan, we're an organization that likes to adapt. And in this book, you're gonna see a lot of adaptation. The urgency of now is yesterday when you talk about food and water. And in that moment, even without napkins and plates and forks, we could have those thousands of tamales being delivered where you could grab this tamal given with love by one person to another, and you could be use the leaf to grab the tamal and eat it in a very humble but powerful way. You're gonna find many stories like this, like the day I was in Haiti cooking beans, black beans. I'm from Spain, and I was cooking the way we cook black beans in Spain. But it happens I was in Haiti. And people don't want our pity, people want our respect. And to give respect so much, to give respect is so easy. I mean, it's so simple. I always want to call President Trump to tell him, it's so easy to give respect to fellow citizens. I'm not trying to make it political, just realistic and pragmatic. To give respect even with people you don't know or you disagree with, or even you don't share religion or way of seeing life. Respect is something so simple to give. Those women were coming to me to tell me, Jose, thank you for cooking for us and providing the food. But hey man, Jose, we 6 hours cooking and they all come to me and, hey, we don't want to be disrespectful, but we don't like the wings, the way you cook them. And in that moment, I realized the power of listening. Not the white boy mentality, this is what you need, people. But the new mentality that we should all believe on listening to the people that want our help. And that day, singing beautiful Haitian songs, it took 2 more hours, but they made the beans into this amazing puree. We passed them through a sieve out of some rice sacks of USAID. And at the end, they did this amazing velvety, silky, shiny, beautiful black beans sauce that they love to eat next to their white rice, and if they're lucky, a piece of meat or fish next to it. And to me, that's the moment I understood the power of listening. Listening to change the world, listening to give dignity. And this is, in a way, something like I know it's a story that keeps going through World Central Kitchen. And in a way, this is a book to celebrate those men and women, to celebrate the thousands and tens of thousands that by now they've been part of working with World Central Kitchen, even if it was only for a day. And in a way, this is a book that I know is gonna capture and make more people join our simple efforts, well through World Central Kitchen or through new efforts at the grassroots that will happen in every corner of the world. I found the other day a letter from Clara Barton. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to buy it because it's expensive like hell. But it's a letter that she was writing to a friend, and she was just wondering and mentioning after she retired from the American Red Cross she founded. She was wondering if she was supposed to write a book to make sure that what they achieved at the early days of the Red Cross will forever be remembered. I only laugh and I thought about it because in a way that's what I only try to do with this book and a couple of other books we've been doing. To make sure that we share the story for every person that makes World Central Kitchen possible that is far away beyond whatever I did. World Central Kitchen exists because it's an army of people of goodness that they want to be part of the solution and not just staying home like I did in Katrina. That's why this book exists, and that's why this book that is being written by Sam, a good friend who is a great writer, spent hours and hours and days and months listening from the people, their stories, and in a way he put into the book the voices of all those people. That you see my name in the cover of the book is deceiving. This is a book of we, the people, of every corner around the world where World Central Kitchen has been in action. It's not my book, it's a book of the people.
I'm done.
That was José Andrés with Mark Bittman at the First United Methodist Church at the Chicago Temple at the Chicago Humanities Fall Festival in October 2023. Part 2. Anna Voloshyna and Rick Bayless. Popular blogger and chef Anna Voloshyna was born in southern Ukraine in 1990. Her debut cookbook, Budmo, is filled with Instagram-worthy creations combining traditional Eastern European recipes with her contemporary touch. Stick around till the end of the chat for more information on her humanitarian efforts during this time of crisis. We're treated to her being interviewed by Chicago's own Rick Bayless, acclaimed chef, restaurateur, a winner on Bravo's Top Chef Masters, and host of the Daytime Emmy-nominated Mexico, One Plate at a Time. Writer of 9 cookbooks, and if you haven't yet, you gotta check out his mainstay Chicago spots, including Frontera Grill and Topolobampo, with many more to choose from. His teaching and learning skills really shine in this conversation, and check the show notes to learn more about his philanthropy through the Frontera Farmer Foundation and Frontera Scholarship.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Wow, thank you all so much for coming out. We've got a really lively conversation, I'm going to call it that, planned for you this afternoon about a cuisine that may be sort of new to a lot of you, because I will tell you that when they asked me to lead this conversation, I was super excited because it's not a cuisine that I know that much about. And when I got a copy of Anna's beautiful book, I was super excited to delve into it. But I think the place that we need to start is certainly what we all hear in the news about Ukraine. Well, we're going to come back to that later on in our conversation. But putting it in its geographical place, I think, is really important for us to start with, because as I was starting to read through this book, all of a sudden I realized that there were a lot of influences in Ukrainian food that I didn't sort of expect. And so we all can relate it to Russian food, because that's on one side of Ukraine. But then when you think about that, it borders on the Black Sea, and you've got all of those countries around that sea that go down into Bulgaria and Turkey, and in Georgia, and you start to see those kind of influences coming in this cuisine. I thought that was a really good place to start. So when you talk about Ukrainian food, how do you describe the intersection that you find there?
So, hi everybody. I'm so happy to be here. So, Ukraine has the most fortunate and the most unfortunate location. We have a lot of neighbors, and a lot of those neighbors were great empires once. So, Ukraine was conquered and it was teared apart, and a lot of those cultures left its mark on Ukrainian cuisine. Why we have a fortunate location is because we have 2 seas in Ukraine, Black Sea and Azov Sea, and we have the most amazing land, the most fertile land, so we can grow anything. You can put a stick just in the soil and it will just blossom. So that's why we have one of the best produce in Europe, and that's why we have so many grains that builds our culture, culinary culture, and our dishes and menus. But again, we have so many countries that tried to conquer Ukraine over these years, and they left their recipes with us, and we kept the best. I'm promising you. And when you travel through Ukraine from east to west, you will see that the culinary culture will change. On the eastern side, it's more Russian, it's more Soviet, I would say. And then you travel and you discover these beautiful canteens, beautiful bakeries, and it's more European in a traditional sense of this world, like beautiful pastries, these coffee shops, everything is so lively and so elegant. So you got the idea. And when you go closer to the sea, you will see the Jewish influence. You will see Turkish influence because we have, once we had Crimea, we had a lot of those flavors there. And hopefully they will come back to Ukraine very soon. And I wanted to celebrate that in Budmo because I wanted to show that Ukrainian cuisine is vibrant, it's fresh, it's comforting, and at the same time it has all those different elements that can coexist in Ukraine. It's not just borscht and dumplings, it's so much more.
But it is borscht and dumplings
Oh, yeah.
too.
It is the heart of our
Don't want to
cuisine.
disappoint you there, okay? So you mentioned the name of your book, so pronounce it for us so that everybody can hear this.
The name is Budmo.
Budmo. And what does Budmo mean?
That means cheers. So, no, that means let us be in Ukrainian, but we use it instead of cheers. And it means let us be healthy, let us be together, let us be celebrating this moment. And that's one of the most cheerful words in Ukrainian. And that's how I wanted to represent this book. This book is about celebration. It's about celebration culture. It's about celebration family recipes and the community.
So you mentioned how incredibly fertile the land in Ukraine is. And I don't think that's just one of those sort of idle boasts, because I think every day on some newscast, I hear about the fact that a lot of the stuff that is grown in Ukraine can't get out, or that people are not growing it because of one thing or another. And so it led me to go and investigate the amount that Ukraine produces. And I will tell you that before we started hearing Ukraine in the news every day, I never would have told you that Ukraine produced as much. What are the main things that are produced in Ukraine?
A lot of grains.
Lot of grains.
Lots of that. So it's mostly wheat.
Mhm.
We also produce corn, which was brought to us by Khrushchev from the United States,
Uh-huh.
and lots of sunflowers. We have the most beautiful sunflower fields, and we produce a lot of sunflower oil. And I used to go to Trader Joe's and just pick a bottle, just turn it, and made in Ukraine.
Made in Ukraine.
Not anymore. Now it's
Right.
Mexico, because we can not export that much right now, and we lost a lot of our fields, and half of them are mined, half of them are under occupation.
Yeah.
So it's very unfortunate.
But that whole thing about sunflower oil really surprised me a lot. And I had this wonderful opportunity to be in the southern part of France during the sunflower harvest. And it was really beautiful. And so I was curious, and I thought, I wonder if France produces the greatest amount of sunflower oil. But of course, no, it was Ukraine that does. And I can't even imagine how beautiful it must be during sunflower harvest in Ukraine. And we'll just hope that that'll all come back.
So I would surprise you. It's not that beautiful.
It's not.
I just came back from Ukraine, and the only thing I had in my head is I need this photo of a sunflower field, and I'm standing there having my best fashion moment. And I came there, and the sunflower fields were get harvested. And how they harvest them, they let them dry right on the stalk.
Yeah.
So it's basically all gloomy and everything is dry. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I get. Like, no sunflower field photo. And then we traveled all over Ukraine. We haven't found even one. And then we were going to my hometown, and in the middle of nowhere, we found that one sunflower field that was blooming. It was beautiful. I don't know which crazy person planted it, because it was so out of season, and I got my photo.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You haven't sort of like encouraged me to go to Ukraine during the sunflower harvest now, but and I told you that I'm cooking a big meal out of this book on Monday night. But the one that I settled on was the eggplant caviar because it's got things like fenugreek in it, which a spice that I absolutely love. So tell us about what role all of those dips and snacky things play in Ukrainian cuisine.
Oh, they play big role.
That's what I thought.
Basically, they are always on the table just to add some flavoring, something pickled, something tangy, because we have a lot of heavy dishes, comforting dishes with potatoes and meat, and like you always have potato and meat on the table, but you need to bring it back to life somehow. And by using these wonderful spreads and condiments, you just add the flavor. And I love that eggplant caviar, especially because this is the southern dish, and it's something that you will see on everybody's table during summer and fall. And when I went back home, my mom made it for me, and when I went to cook at the front line for our soldiers, this is what I made because I wanted to bring a southern dish because I was not able to come to the south before I went to the front line, and I was gathering all the ingredients from my trip to bring to them and cook with them. And I'm like, okay, if I'm not going to bring anything from the south, I'm bringing the recipe.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And actually, I just told the soldiers to make it because I was like cooking in the kitchen, and they were fire roasting the eggplants, and they just chopped everything for me. It was just lovely, and they loved that recipe.
So you said you could use it as a condiment. If you were going to spread it on something, what would you spread it on?
Piece of rye bread.
Of rye bread? I somehow guessed that that's what you were going to say. It sounds I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, when I make it, I'm going to do the same thing. So there is this thing in Mexican culture, culinary culture, and in fact, it sort of exists lots of places in the Spanish-speaking world that they call ensalada rusa, Russian salad. And I do believe it's in this book. And it's a whole bunch of vegetables with a creamy dressing, right? So how do you make it how do you make a real one? Because in Mexico, honest to goodness, it is so popular to put out on buffets and stuff. You find it everywhere. And even though they call it Russian salad, it doesn't really taste very Russian there because they just put a whole lot of pickled jalapenos with mayonnaise and then put that on boiled vegetables. And so that's your ensalada rusa. And people just adore it. It's like potato salad in a way. But tell us about how it's made in Ukraine.
So this recipe is very controversial. And I just need to say that this book was...
should I have called it Ukrainian salad instead of Russian salad?
No, it's not Ukrainian. So it has a long history, very twisted history. So when I was writing this book, it was all before war. It went to print before war. If I had my way and I foreseen the future, I would just remove it. First of all, because it's a Soviet dish. Yeah. This version I have in my book is from a Georgian chef, because in Georgia, they make it lighter, they make it vegetarian, and they make it with fresh herbs, which I loved. So in my head, it's a Georgian salad now, Georgian potato salad. But the true story about this one is it was created in Russia. It was created by a French chef. Definitely not Russian flavors at all, but it was so lavish. It had like langoustines, and it had caviar and everything, all the expensive stuff. But then when USSR came, they like, okay, people are miserable. We want to keep it that way, but we want to give them something. We want to give them hope. And they brought back this salad. And with every year of USSR, the salad got more and more cheap and miserable. And this is what we get. But still, when you put potato and meat together with a creamy dressing, tastes good.
What kind of meat?
You can put chicken breast, but what I grew up eating, and everybody in Ukraine, Russia, etc., grew up eating, is some sort of bologna chopped and put
okay.
into the salad. So it was very traditional to serve it during the New Year's Eve. Not anymore. I think in Ukraine everybody hates this salad. But what saved me is this salad is more Georgian, and I was smart enough to use a Georgian recipe, Georgian interpretation, and I like it more because it's more vibrant, it's lighter. I did not use the heavy dressing, and it has herbs, which makes it a little bit more healthier, if it's possible.
What part of Ukraine is the Georgian influence the strongest?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
The thing is, we embraced Georgian cuisine, I would say maybe 10, 15 years ago. We always had Georgian dishes because we were part of the USSR. And if you will go to Tbilisi, any city in Georgia, you will find borscht everywhere. And same in Ukraine, you just travel to pretty much any city and you will find a Georgian cafe or a restaurant.
How do you describe that cuisine sort of in contrast to, say, Russian cuisine?
The flavors are somehow familiar, and they use a lot of herbs that Russian and Ukrainian cuisine don't use. Cilantro and basil, especially purple basil, which is wonderful. And right now, cilantro is just slowly entering Ukrainian cuisine, just slowly, because I did not grow up eating cilantro, and when I came here,
but I noticed you have it in a lot of recipes in
because
here.
of Georgia, and I came here and I embraced cilantro. I started to like it a lot, and now I came back to Ukraine and I see cilantro on the menu, but it's not something that most people will prefer. They will say dill or parsley. That's the main herbs. Cilantro is just.
I noticed that one of the dishes I've chosen to make for my dinner on Monday night has the parsley, the dill, and you put cilantro in there with those three. And I can't wait to taste that combination because that's not something that I have ever had before. So Georgian dishes, what are the most famous Georgian dishes? So if we went into a restaurant and we go, oh, that's a famous Georgian dish, what would they be?
Of course, hachapuri. Hachapuri is a flatbread with a lot of cheese, and it can be made in many shapes and forms. And sometimes, I think the most famous one is the one that's shaped like a boat with an egg and butter. And I have the recipe in the book, and this is one of my favorite recipes to teach people to make because it's simple, but everybody's like, wow, what is that? This is incredible. And everybody's so proud when they make it. And it looks incredible. And this is the most Instagrammable recipe ever.
That was the first page I turned down in the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in Ukraine, again, why this recipe is in the book, because in Ukraine, you can go and you can find this recipe because Georgia and Ukraine, I think we have a very similar spirit. And despite our government is not always on the same page, but people are supporting us. And I have a lot of Georgian friends. I traveled to Georgia to research for this book because I felt like I want to represent some of the recipes. And it was just lovely how they refused to speak Russian with me. And I was like, you are my brother. We spoke English. And I know that the country is suffering from Russian aggression, not the same way like Ukraine, but longer even. So I feel like we share the same spirit, and I'm proud that I have these recipes in my book.
Good. Well, the reason that I was drawn to that recipe right away is because I really love Turkish food, and they make something called pide in Turkey that is that same shape. And so when I saw it in your book, I thought, oh, that was the first tip-off I had that there was a relationship between the cuisines of all around that sea. And then I looked at the way that you did it with a layer of the cheese and then covering it with the pastry and then more cheese on the top. And I was like, yeah, I could go for that. I think I could go for that. And you put the egg on the top of it. And that's super
yes. And
cool.
then when everything is like melted, you just mix everything together and just like take a part of the bread and just dip and enjoy. This is
really
incredible.
Hungry.
Oh my God.
No, that's a good one. Okay, so we need to talk a little bit. we've covered the basics of the book, except that you do have to talk about your the duck dish that's in there.
Okay, so everybody's asking what's the favorite dish, and the answer is always the same: my grandma's roasted duck. It is so good. It is very easy to make, and this is what I make on Thanksgiving. I don't make turkey. I make this duck, and this is the easiest duck ever. So you roast it whole. You need this Dutch oven that will hold the duck. I have this huge old one that is wonderful, and it is always with apples because that's how my grandma made that. And I think apples create this lovely balance, and you can serve duck with that apples. You can make a sauce out of that, or you can serve those slices, and the duck is so juicy. It is so beautiful, and it just the most easy way to, okay, except for hachapuri, this is the second most impressive dish that you will just carve at the table and people will say, wow, this is incredible, and you don't spend any time making it. You just rub it, put it in the oven, roast it, and it's just done.
Beautiful. Okay, you address this some in your book, but talk to us about what happened to Ukrainian food during that period from, I'm going to say it's like 41 or to 91, something like that, when Ukraine was part of the USSR.
Actually, it started earlier because we were part of the Russian Empire, and then once the Soviet Union formed, it was like somewhere around that. They decided that this is a huge territory. How do we unite everything? We need one cuisine for everybody. So we now Georgian cuisine will give a few recipes. Ukrainian cuisine will give a few recipes. Russian cuisine will give a lot of recipes, and a little bit of mishmash French dishes. I don't know. I know why, because they were admiring that cuisine so much. They could not represent it properly, but still. And then they thought, if we will erase the culture, the culinary culture of every country, and make something the same for everybody, then the country will be the same, and we will unite everybody. And in Ukraine, we were forbidden to publish Ukrainian cookbooks. No research, a lot of recipes were lost. A lot of culinary culture is so deep that we need to dig it out. And that's why right now a lot of chefs and a lot of culinary researchers, myself included, we are trying to understand what was the Ukrainian cuisine before Russia, before USSR. And it's very hard because we have basically nothing that can lead us. We have a little bit, and we have our imagination, and I think we just need to find the base for it and then dig and create something unique. And this is the proper time to do it, to just create flavors based on those almost lost knowledge.
That's really, really fascinating to me because if I'm not mistaken, they also outlawed teaching school in Ukrainian, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Everything was in Russian. And that's certainly one way that a culture will obliterate another culture. And same sort of thing has happened, I would say, with the Native American community, that they have, because their languages were so obliterated during many generations, with that, you often lose the cuisine. And then the availability of ingredients to make Native American dishes was pretty much obliterated as well, except for a few foragers. And now that community is trying to do exactly the same thing that you guys are doing in Ukraine, which is to go back, talk to the elders, figure out if they have memories of certain dishes and how they would go together, and sort of give them new life. But in that giving of new life, you're also going to give them new life in with let's just call it a modern look, because we eat slightly different than we used to eat. And good example is the cilantro in this book, that, yeah, we're used to using that. And yes, it's used in Georgian cooking. And so now it makes sense that it's going to be in a modern Ukrainian cookbook.
Absolutely. So again, because of the USSR, it was very strict what you can grow and what you can't grow. So we have this all amazing land, and we cannot grow golden beets. We could not grow a lot of things that would make sense to grow. We had asparagus before it was cool, and then we lost it because of the USSR, because nobody understood it. It's like, why do you grow it?
Right.
Go grow wheat or something like that. So when the whole world was developing their cuisine, Ukraine was standing still. And right now, this is the time for us to create something, to collaborate, to learn modern techniques. And I see nothing wrong with embracing techniques from other countries. I want to see Ukrainian umami other than fermented stuff like pickles and dried mushrooms. I want Ukrainian misos. I want, which I had this creative project and I love it. I want to see more of that, more interesting concepts, more restaurants, more chefs. And I think we will see it in the next 10 years. I already saw it in Ukraine, and I'm excited to share it with the world.
Okay, so now we have to talk about the state of Ukraine today, and I guess my question is: you've just returned from Ukraine, so give us the lay of the land. What's it like in Ukraine right now, and what's this? I'm really interested in the state of this emerging cuisine or the preservation of this cuisine.
So, weirdly enough, people are more creative than ever. I feel like war created that background for people to just, okay, I'm just going to do what I want to do because there might be no chance for tomorrow. So I'm doing it right now. I visited a lot of restaurants. I cooked with a lot of chefs, and what I saw is incredible creativity. So right now, Ukrainians are so traumatized and damaged by this war, and we don't want anything Russian. We just want our own. We want our peace. We want our cuisine. So basically, if you refuse to eat Russian dishes and you refuse to eat Soviet dishes, what do you eat? And people want to eat something that belongs to Ukraine. And they are digging deep. They are searching for ingredients that are native to Ukraine. They are searching for methods. They're searching for old recipes. And basically, it's not even recipes. It's just guidance. And with that guidance, they can create something unique and interesting.
If we want to support Ukraine in any way, what would you recommend? I mean, besides us cooking from your book and going to
Anela.
Yeah, okay. How can we support?
So I traveled through the whole Ukraine, and I've been at the front line. And people who took me to the front line, they are from International Aid Legion. So this is an organization of volunteers, and they are so incredible. They are foodies as well, and they just I arranged everything during my trip. Everything was perfect, but this one tiny details that was the most important to me, to go at the front line and cook for our soldiers. And I had no arrangements because I didn't know anybody. And those people, they arranged everything in 30 minutes because they helped those soldiers so much that the soldiers just welcomed me with open arms. They helped me. They peeled whatever needed to be peeled. They washed the dishes. They did everything because those people are helping them. And I used to think that I can help multiple organizations, but now I feel like I need to focus my energy. Our military guys need all the support because they are the ones that protect us and that they allow people to have some sort of a normal life, if you can say that. And International Aid Legion, they are my personal friends. I support them, and they evacuated 24,000 people from the occupied territories and the territories that were freed from Russian occupation. And they are just my superheroes, superhumans, and this is the organization I support.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Well, Anna, thank you so very much for spending the time with me, and thank you for opening my eyes to such a remarkable cuisine.
Thank you so much, Chef. Thank you.
That was Anna Voloshyna with Rick Bayless at the Newberry Library at the Chicago Humanities Fall Festival in October 2023. Head to chicagohumanities.org for links to both of their cookbooks, as well as José Andrés and Mark Bittman's, plus resources to get more information on all of the organizations mentioned or to send donations their way. Chicago Humanities Tapes is produced and hosted by me, Elisa Rosenthal, with help from the awesome staff over at Chicago Humanities. Shout out to the hardworking staff who are programming these live events to bring them right to you, and the production staff who are making them sound super crisp. For more than 30 years, Chicago Humanities has created experiences through culture, creativity, and connection. Check out chicagohumanities.org for more information on becoming a member, so you'll be the first to know about upcoming events and other insider perks. The podcast will be taking a winter break, but we'll be back soon with lots of new episodes for you. You can always listen through our backlog of episodes of Chicago Humanities Tapes, available wherever you stream your podcasts. And if you're so moved, spread the holiday cheer and leave a rating and review, share your favorite episode, and hit subscribe to be notified when we're back. Wishing everyone a safe and happy winter. And in the meantime, stay human.